So if you guys don't know, Gary is actually the author of Seed of the Soul. He's a top spiritual teacher, and he's featured on the Oprah show more than 34 times. The beauty of his teachings is that he talks about aligning your personality with your soul to achieve authentic power. So Gary, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for your invitation.
There's a concept you talk about. You talk about the little you, the personality, and the big you, the soul. So for people that are not aware, what is the difference between the two?
In one sense, there is no difference. You are. Let me first start this way. I want to suggest to all of our listeners that there is a great, unprecedented, epic transformation in human consciousness. It's happening to our entire species at the same time. And it's happening very fast, within a few human generations. Our old consciousness took 300,000 years to evolve. So you can see this is new, unprecedented, and in every way. The old consciousness was limited to what we could see and taste and touch and hear and smell. And its understanding of power was the ability to manipulate and to control. Let's call this five-sensory awareness, the old consciousness. The new consciousness is not limited to the five senses. We know in some way that's significant to us that we are more than minds and bodies. We have an aspect of ourselves that is eternal, that existed before we were born and will exist after we die. That is the soul. So you are the personality, and I am a personality. Everyone who's alive in the Earth School is a domain of time and space and matter and duality and fear. None of these things exist outside of the Earth School. Everyone, to be in the Earth School and to have a personality are the same thing. And every personality has loving and frightened parts. And I'll get into that in a minute. But I want to get back to your question. What's the difference between the little you and the big you? Or the you with a little y and the you with the big Y? The you with the big Y is your soul. Now, from the perspective of the old consciousness, soul was not something that was taken seriously except by Christians or in theological discussions. But that was from the old consciousness. From the new consciousness, soul is real. It's important. And you are an incarnation of a part of the energy of your soul. That's you with a big Y. The part that incarnated, the part that has your birthday and your death day, that's the you with a little y. And what we're going to be talking about is the relationship between the you with a little y and the big Y, you, the relationship between your personality and your soul. And this is important now because the new consciousness not only is not limited to the five senses, but it also has a new understanding of power. And that's the ability, that is the alignment of your personality with your soul, of the little you with the big you. The big you has several intentions for them: harmony, cooperation, sharing, and reverence for life. When you align yourself with the intentions of your soul, you create authentic power. That's real power. The ability to manipulate and to control is external power. And it's not only obsolete, it's now toxic. It's counterproductive. It used to be our good medicine. Now it prevents our evolution and threatens our survival. The pursuit of external power now produces only violence and destruction. There is no good to it at all. Just as what is happening in your part of the world is a dramatic and lethal conflict of pursuits of external power. But even in all countries, the pursuit of external power is proving itself to be producing only violence and destruction. And the only power that produces contentment, meaning, joy, fulfillment, gratification, that is authentic power. So at every level, from interpersonal to international, this new consciousness is illuminating what we do, what we see, and our experiences. And in particular now, it's a matter of what we choose to do in response to these things that are happening around us. So in your part of the world, these conflicting pursuits of external power happen at every level. Some of them, you might say, are Palestinian-Israeli. Another way of looking at it is Arab-Jew. Another way of looking at it is Israel-Gaza, Lebanon. Another way of looking at it is the way you interact with your parents, the way you interact with your neighbors. These also are conflicting pursuits of external power. And what we're seeing from the perspective of the new consciousness is that everything that goes around us reflects the pursuit of external power, and we are the source of that pursuit. The world reflects us. Now, you might say, well, wait a minute, I didn't pick a fight with the Israelis, or I didn't pick a fight with the Palestinians. Well, there's arguments on both sides of that. It doesn't matter who did what. If there is the pursuit of external power, it produces only violence and destruction. It's not a matter of right, and it's not a matter of wrong. The universe doesn't look at experience in terms of good and bad, better and worse. It looks at it in terms of cause and effect. Every effect has a cause, and every cause creates an effect. And if you participate in the cause, you will participate in the effect. This basic understanding, which in the East, and by that I mean in Buddhist countries for the most part, it means karma. But everyone understands that term. It just means you're responsible for what you create is going to come back to you. You can try to avoid it, but you can't. It's the impersonal, flawless, universal teacher of responsibility. So now, let's look at what's happening. Like, you live in Beirut, right?
Yes.
And I asked you just before we started to talk, are things tense there? Because if people are listening to this podcast in the future, you can know that this is the time when warfare has broken out again, open warfare. And again, the Jews say one thing, the Arabs say another, the Israelis say this, the Palestinians say that. The reality is, the pursuit of external power is dominating every aspect of life in this part of the world.
Yes.
Unless, and here we come to the interesting thing, unless it's in you, you have the choice not to pursue external power. And that's what we're coming to. So I asked you if it was tense in your part of the world, and you said it was. Can you tell me, or tell our viewers, what you are experiencing?
Yeah, so basically yesterday, I usually work from my balcony, and I live on a mountain, right? And I can see the next mountain in front of me. And yesterday and today, I could actually see bombs and the smoke from bombs right in front of me. And it's to some extent heartbreaking that all of this is happening, and I sometimes think, why? Why is that happening? What's the purpose of all this?
Good questions. Those are the best questions that can be asked. There's only one that is more effective. What is my relationship to all of this? What can I do about all of this? And you said it was sort of heartbreaking. It's completely heartbreaking. It's the ruthless destruction of life. It's brutality. It's complete separation without caring, without compassion. So we can say, well, that's just the way they are in the Middle East. But it's not just in the Middle East. It's everywhere that there is the pursuit of external power. It's in the Ukraine with Russia. And that high state of tension exists between the United States and China and NATO and the Soviet Union, or Russia now. The entire world that we have inherited from the old consciousness, from a five-sensory species, is built on external power. And it's failing. It's crumbling. It's not functional anymore. It's clearly not functional where you are, and it's not functional anywhere in the world. All of our social structures are disintegrating, and they don't have any salvage value because they are obsolete. They express external power. They teach external power. They create external power, and all of that is counterproductive to our evolution. And so a new world is being born. And it may seem as though it's being born slowly, but it's being born at lightning speed. And we are part of it right now. Your generation, millennial, and Gen Z, were born, are the first generations to experience the new consciousness from birth. And so for you, when I talk about the new consciousness, it's not the new consciousness, it's human consciousness. This is the way we are. You have nothing to compare it to. If you were born in my generation or the one after it, maybe one more, you were born into the old consciousness, and you know what it's like to be limited to the five senses, to have a consciousness that says and believes and experiences that if something cannot be touched or heard or seen or smelled or tasted, it doesn't exist. It's a delusion or a hallucination. But the new consciousness is not limited in that way. And we know there are many things that we're beginning to experience that cannot be explained by the old consciousness and are rejected by the intellect, but are real. Now what do we do? We choose, because we are choosers. From the perspective of the new consciousness, we are powerful and creative, compassionate and loving spirits. Choice is who we are. Choice is our essence. Choice is our power. And we cannot stop choosing. That's a choice. And with every choice, we create consequences. And those consequences are either painful and destructive, unhealthy, or they are blissful and constructive and healthy. And the difference between them is the intention that we hold when we speak or when we act. I said that the Earth School is a domain of time and space and matter and duality. That means the duality part, that for every this, there's a that. for every big, small, male, female. Everything has its opposite. The fundamental duality in the Earth School is love and fear. The opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. And the question is, when we speak and when we act, do we speak and act with love or in fear? It's always one of those two. And it's so important to know the difference, because the difference is the difference between the experiences that you will create being positive and joyful or destructive and sorrowful. So now we come to what's going on in the world, whether it's a divisive election in the United States, where people are already very polarized between conservative and between the old and the new, between rigid and flexible, between open and closed, between acceptance and judgment. It's exacerbating those, making them worse. And so we have more violence in our society. But the very core of negativity in the world has been, probably since 1948, in the Middle East. And you are broadcasting your podcast from that place. So these are very pertinent, pregnant, and important questions that you're asking. So you stand on your balcony and you look into the valley and you see the smoke from bombs. And you see before your very eyes lives shattered, lives torn apart, bodies blown to pieces. Why? Because the Israelis are pursuing external power. Because Hezbollah is pursuing external power. Or is Hezbollah pursuing external power because the Israelis, and back and forth and back and forth? That's irrelevant. What is relevant is there is no heart involved, no compassion, no connection, no caring. In short, no love. And that's what you can do to change the situation. When you see this horror, you can judge it and say, that's horror, and these people are to blame. Or you can say, this is the pursuit of external power, and everything I'm seeing that I abhor outside myself, I have inside myself. Will I choose to act on it again, or will I choose to experience it, what it's like in me? Forget about the world outside now, and choose to move beyond that in me. That is creating real power, authentic power. So whenever you have an emotional reaction to something, a painful judgment that has an emotional charge, instead of looking at the world and trying to change the world to make yourself feel better, instead look inside yourself. And you will find inside yourself internal dynamics. And it's those internal dynamics that are creating the painful and the blissful experiences that you encounter. What happens in the world, whether it's a rude person or a violent neighbor or a violent country or all around you violence, all of that is not the cause, or any of that is the cause of your painful emotional experiences. The outside world activates your internal dynamics. And until you look at them and change them, you'll continue to have emotional pain. When you try to change the outside world, that's the pursuit of external power that we're talking about. That's what every frightened part of every personality does. It pursues external power. It tries to change the world to make itself feel better. doesn't change you, and it doesn't change the world. What can change the world is changing you. And this sounds absurd to 5th century consciousness. That is because there exists in 5th century consciousness, the old consciousness, an unclimbable wall, an uncrossable barrier between in here and out there. And from the perspective of the old consciousness, it is ridiculous to say that changing yourself can change the world. From the new consciousness, something else appears. You realize that there's no other way to change the world because there is no difference between in here and out there. Gandhi knew this. All of our great, not religions, but the great souls after whom our religions are named knew this and know this. And now we know this because we are acquiring as a gift from the universe a new consciousness for the first time since the origin of human experience. It's amazing that we're alive in this time. We stand with one foot in the old world and the old consciousness and another foot in the new world and the new consciousness. And we must choose between them each moment.
You know, Gary, I could relate so much to what you said because everything that's happening on an international level, I've seen it in myself personally, the effect of external power. When I was younger, I was a big troublemaker. And I tried to manipulate and control people because I was suffering inside. And as I went through life, I had to deal with that suffering myself. Right? I felt the suffering I inflicted on others. And then I started my spiritual journey in an attempt to stop the suffering. And I read The Power of Now. I meditated a lot and I glimpsed and started living more and more from the soul. And there's a beautiful bliss and peace within that I now realize is the ultimate form of power. Like you say, not the power of the ego that tries to manipulate and control and that's fearful. It's a power of love that's actually positive.
It's completely positive. There's nothing but love. Now that may seem unusual. You say, well, what about the bombs? That's love? What about an agonizing death by cancer? Is that love? What about the death of a child? Is that love? Yes, it's painful, and it doesn't appear as love. Fear is love masquerading as fear. You might put it that way. I'm saying that because as our new consciousness emerges within us, we begin to see that there is nothing but love. Love heals everything, and love is all there is. Whenever you experience a frightened part of your personality, in your case, as you've just shared, you see bombs fall, and you feel this. The pain that you feel is coming from inside you. You're seeing those bombs fall through the lens of fear. You could see them through the lens of love. You could say, this is an opportunity for everyone involved, those who are dropping the bombs and those who are being dropped on, to look inside themselves and see what can be changed instead of trying to change the world. In other words, let me put it this way. If you have no compassion for those who have no compassion, what's the difference between you? If you're Lebanese and you say these Israelis, they have no compassion. If you have no compassion for them, what is the difference between you and an Israeli? And I say this to Israelis, identical. The Israelis say, look what the people in Gaza did. They rained 10,000 missiles in a short period of time on children, on families. They are brutal. They are demons. They are Satan. They are whatever they choose to call negativity that they project outside themselves. So they have no compassion for the Israelis, who have no compassion for them. What is the difference between them? Nothing. In other words, when you challenge the darkness, you yourself step into the darkness.
It brings to mind Jesus, and when he said, forgive them for they do not know what they're doing.
That's right. That's compassion, isn't it? He could have said, these are the people I'm supposed to be the king of. These are the people that are worshiping me. I can do better than this. Everyone can do better than this. He could have judged them. He could have judged the Romans in their brutality. He could have judged the people who were condemning him in their brutality, but he had compassion for them. What created that compassion? When you see somebody behaving brutally or cruelly or impolitely or rudely, you know that they are acting from a frightened part of their personality, because a loving part would not do that. And because you have experienced your own frightened parts, as you've been saying, you know how painful it is. So when you see someone else acting from a frightened part of his or her personality, you know they're in pain. You know they're in a lot of pain. And when you allow that thought to be with you, that realization to be with you, instead of judging them, that judgment turns into compassion. Your heart begins to melt because you know what they're experiencing and it's painful. That's compassion. That's what Jesus did. That kind of transformation made him the Christ. And it all happened not very far from where your podcast is being broadcast. And still, this is the heart of negativity, because there is so much righteousness and bitterness and hatred, and it's all projected outward, and it's all justified. Every frightened part of your personality is always right to itself, is always rigid and righteous, without fail. And it pursues external power without fail. And the consequences are always violent and destructive and painful. This is what we're beginning to see from our new perspective. This was invisible in 1948. This was invisible just 1 or 2 generations earlier. This was invisible when I was born. It's not invisible now. Now the question is, for millennials, for Gen Z, not what is the new consciousness. That's a meaningless question to them, because consciousness is consciousness for them. But they know that something big is happening, even in extreme conflict, like the Middle East is now and will be again until we begin to change, and we are changing. Even there, where does the compassion come from? There's only one place it can come from. You. Can you cause someone else to be compassionate? Can you put up a billboard saying, be compassionate? If you put up a billboard saying, be compassionate to the Israelis, someone would tear it down. If the Israelis did that, someone would burn it. Compassion will only come from in you. And until you choose to create authentic power, you will not change. And when you have a part of your personality that is too painful or too shameful for you to look at or to accept, you don't accept it. You reject it in you, and you project it outward onto others. And when you see it outside yourself, you don't like it at all. This is not new. Carl Jung explored this. He called it projection, because that's what it is. As we become multisensory, we can see this happen in ourselves, and we can challenge it in ourselves. Instead of challenging the world and challenging the other, we challenge in ourselves, the part that is judgmental, right, and rich and rigid, the part that wants the other to be different so that it will feel better about itself. And so we say, this is especially a poignant discussion because you are in the center of this negativity that's unfolding, and everyone's holding their breath to hope that it doesn't go completely out of control. Are you going to go completely out of control? Or are you going to hold on to what is valuable to you, to what is meaningful to you? And that is connection. Connection. I heard a true story once. One of the groups of American Jews that went to Israel, and their idea was a good one, is to make real connections between Palestinians and Israelis in the very small parts of these populations that's open to that. And so they had a small gathering in a house, not in a kibbutz, but in a small village, Palestinian village. And a group of Israelis and a group of Palestinians were together for the morning and the afternoon. And they had a meal together. And at first there was the usual. Said, can this be? Is this person in my house? But because of the goodwill, the day went on, people started to talk. But there were two fellows who kept themselves aside. One Israeli, one Palestinian. And they were talking through the morning, through the afternoon. Oh, Fahud. This makes me cry when I think about it. But when the bus came to take the Israelis back to the kibbutz, the two young men were still there talking. And as they parted, the young Palestinian said to the young Israeli, listen, tomorrow you're going to be standing at a roadblock, and I'm going to be there. Throwing rocks. So be careful, man. Be careful, man. Be careful. That touched me so deeply. I was a paratrooper. I could hardly wait to join the Army because I thought that would make me admirable. Or, I couldn't say it in those days, lovable. But I didn't realize how frightened I was of not meeting my own expectations or the expectations of my parents or the expectations of my peers. Then I became an officer in the infantry. Then I became an officer in the special forces. We wore green berets. And I went to Vietnam. And I really wanted to kill. I was so angry. I was addicted to sex, and I was violent, emotionally violent. But I knew that I would ruin my life if I killed anybody. But I could do it in the Army and get praised for it. So I enlisted in the Army, in the infantry, in the airborne, in the special forces. I volunteered to go to Vietnam. I went to Vietnam. I trained to kill in Vietnam. I intended to kill in Vietnam. I was a combat soldier in Vietnam, and I left Vietnam without killing. I was never in the right place at the right time, or the rainforest was too thick, or I was blessed. Now I can look back on it and see I was blessed. I'm so grateful now. I left Vietnam without killing. And when I think about the story of those two young men who came so close in one day of smoking and talking together, that when they separated, one was concerned about the other, who would be on the other side of a roadblock with a rifle, and he'd be on his side of a roadblock with rocks. Now, this was a while ago, and those young men, if they knew what we know, if they could discuss what you are discussing with people on your podcast, they could have taken that one step further. And one of them could have said, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to point my rifle at anyone anymore, ever. And the other could have said, I'm never going to throw a rock. Throwing a rock is a symbol of what I'm doing with my energy, with my hatred, with my fear. And it would have caused big grief for them, for their families. But that's the direction we're going, Faoud, and you know it, and the people listening to your podcast know it. And so we can do them a service by reminding them that what they are experiencing is real. It's not fantasy. And that intention determines the consequences that you create, the karma that you create. Most people think an intention is a goal, like I'm going to be an architect, or I'm going to visit Japan, I'm going to have a family. These are out-tensions, they're physical goals. But an intention from the new consciousness, from that perspective, is a quality of consciousness. When you speak or act from love, you infuse that action or that word with that quality of consciousness, and that is what creates the consequences that you will experience. And when you speak or act from fear, you infuse your word and your deed with that quality of consciousness, and that creates the consequences you experience. It's not your deeds, it's the intention that you hold that creates consequences for you. In other words, as you become multisensory and see that real power, authentic power, is the alignment of your personality with your soul. And that means finding and experiencing all of the parts of your personality that are not aligned with your soul, that are not grateful, that are not content or patient or caring. And you challenge them by moving beyond the control of them. That you put yourself into a new experience. You move yourself in a new direction, and that direction is love. Can you do it? Where you are, when the next bombs that fall may fall on your side of the valley, may fall on your street, on your building. You can't control that, but you can control what you will do inside when it does or it doesn't happen. That's your power. And using that power, you can transform your life. There's no other way to do it. And that's creating authentic power. It requires emotional awareness, looking inside yourself instead of outside, putting your attention in your throat, in your chest, in your solar plexus areas, and looking for physical sensations, not labels like good, bad, happy, painful. No. Physical sensations like aching, throbbing, churning, burning, stabbing, stinging. Like when you hit your thumb with a hammer when you're aiming for a nail. I've done that. That hurts. Oh, that's physical pain. That's a physical sensation. That's how much you hurt in one of your energy processing centers when you are processing your energy in fear and doubt. And that's what you change when you create authentic power. You look at what you're experiencing, and in that moment, you use your willpower, your free will, to move your attention into a part of your personality that's loving. You remember a time when you were loved and loving, and you knew it. And then choose to act or speak from that energy while you're experiencing the frightened part of your personality and its painful physical sensations and its judgmental thoughts. That's the moment of creating authentic power. That's where the rubber meets the road. We don't need, by we, I'm talking about all of us in the Earth School. We don't need more United Nations peacekeepers. We don't. We don't need more negotiation between governments. We don't need more treaties. That produces nothing. Not now. In the world that 5th century consciousness created, those things were helpful. They were impulses toward peace. Now, the impulse towards peace comes from the only place it ever has come from, your heart. And until you begin to pay attention to it and act on it, which requires commitment and courage and compassion and conscious communication and actions, you won't change. There's nothing wrong with not changing, except that you'll continue to create the same experiences for yourself. You won't change. And the choice is yours, no one else's, moment by moment. If you want to learn more, and I suggest this to everyone listening to your podcast, go to seatofthesoul.com. That's our website. It's named after a book that I wrote called The Seat of the Soul. That's S-E-A-T, like what you sit on, of the SOUL.com. And when you go there, it's filled with things that can be helpful to you. Courses, events, books, programs. And we're co-creating more. And all of them are to support you in becoming emotionally aware and making responsible choices. A responsible choice is a choice that creates consequences for which you are willing to assume responsibility. And consulting intuition is the third tool of creating authentic power. There's only 3 tools. It's simple to understand. The rest is in the doing it. That's where the courage and compassion and commitment come in. They always come in. We weren't born to suffer like this. We were born to love. We now see our experiences as a time of more consciousness than we've ever had before in a learning environment. So we can ask ourselves, what can I learn from this about me, not from about someone else? And what can I do about this in me and not try to change someone else? When you do that, that's the spiritual path. You know, in closing, Fawad, I don't want to answer any questions I can that you still have, but I want to tell you about a time that I had with my Sioux uncle, my Lakota uncle. Lakota is an Aboriginal tribe in the United States. And Linda Francis, my spiritual partner, were adopted into that tribe. And one of their practices is what they call a vision quest. And you go by yourself onto a mountain, and you stay there by yourself for 4 days and 4 nights, and you pray. You're praying for a vision. In Lakota, they say, Ambalechapi, which means crying for a vision. And you say to the Creator, why am I here? What's my purpose? Why am I alive? Not everyone gets a vision or goes on a vision quest, but for those who do, now it's their time to bring that vision into their lives, to make it real, to make it happen in them. If in the conversation you and I are having, someone has seen a glimpse of something, you've been on a vision quest. Now it's up to you to bring it into being. So after 4 days, I came down from the mountain. It was Mount Shasta in Northern California. And I talked to my Sioux uncle. He was guiding me on this path. He lived in Walla Walla, Washington, which is about 5 hours drive away. And I was telling him about the different things that happened, but there was one part of my vision quest I told him about that was the most difficult for me. When I made my circle of sage where I would have the vision quest, I did it in the morning, but I didn't realize at noon there was no shade there, and it was hot. And I was hot. And I lay down with my back against this circle of sage, which is a plant that grows in the desert. And it seemed to me I was so weak. It seemed to me I was a mother. And I was so weak I couldn't move. And right in front of me was my child. And it had a distended belly, and flies were walking on its open eyes. And I couldn't reach out and touch it, my child. And it was horrible, and I cried. And then it seemed to me that I was all the starving mothers in the world with all of their starving children. Oh, that was terrible. And I cried, and I cried, and I cried. So, after the vision quest, other things happened too. But I was telling my uncle these different things, and he was listening. But when I got to that part, when I told him about the starving mothers and their starving children and how I couldn't stop crying, he said, "Oh, nephew, now you're talking like a man." That changed my understanding of masculinity. In that moment, everything that had to do with command, rank, structure, weapons, mission left me. I didn't know what my world was going to be like without them, but I knew it was going to be without them. It was so easy for me when I was younger to pick up a gun, a rifle. In Vietnam, it was an AR-15, new at the time, more lethal than anything before it. Now you can buy them in a gun store here. Because I wasn't connected to anyone. I was right and I was righteous. I went to Vietnam to kill. I had visions of having a target in my sight and my rifle sights. Inhaling, letting half of my breath out, and slowly squeezing one off. That means pulling the trigger slowly and watching the target drop. That's the scene I never saw, and for which I'm so grateful today, because I never made the connection between that target dropping and my brother. Christ made the connection, didn't he? We're making the connection, aren't we? And we can help one another, not by trying to change one another, but by supporting one another and helping each other change ourselves. Like a friend will say, yeah, I know, that's tough. That's tough to watch that scene. A spiritual partner will say, what are you feeling? What were you thinking? Did what you say come from love or from fear? A spiritual partner will help you become aware and use your awareness to love. And a spiritual partnership is a partnership between equals for the purpose of spiritual growth. They didn't have the language, but I feel those two young men, the Palestinian and the Israeli, were becoming spiritual partners to one another.
I do wish the spiritual leaders get to know this story and get to act from that place of love within rather than fear. Right now, I can actually listen to, there's a drone that's always flying above the city 24/7. And the only objective of that drone, and it makes a huge noise, a constant zzz, the only objective is to identify people to kill. And when I talk to friends, I'm like, I can't imagine the children, the mothers that are in the cities that have nothing to do with this, and the torture of all that. But yeah, this podcast has been uplifting, to say the least.
Yes, I was told when I was learning, and I can convey with all of my heart, when you see two people, just people in interaction, and one's oppressing the other, it's appropriate that you do what you can to separate the oppressed from the oppressor. But if you judge either one, you create negative karma for yourself. You don't know enough to judge. You don't know what's coming to conclusion in this one moment. What lines of force that might have originated centuries ago are now happening before your eyes in this moment. Somewhere, maybe in the Middle East, maybe in the United States, there's a drone operator sitting in front of a large screen, and he's looking. And he doesn't yet know about karma. He's as disconnected from life as I was when I was an officer, and I wanted to kill. Or there's someone who's a pilot, or there's someone who's planting a bomb by a road outside of Beirut in preparation for a possible invasion. If you judge them, it's appropriate to do what you can to intervene in a good way with a good heart. But if you judge, you create negative karma for yourself. And if there's any part of you that objects strenuously to that, or even objects a little bit, that's a frightened part of your personality, and that's one that you can challenge. By that I mean choose to move beyond the control of it while you feel it. Every frightened part of your personality is a gift from the universe. It's showing you a part of yourself that you need to experience and move beyond the control of to give the gifts that you were born to give. You know some of your gifts, Faoud, because your face lights up with joy when you recognize one.
I can recognize what you said, because the past 2 to 4 weeks, you just hit the nail right on the point, right on the name. The past 2 to 4 weeks, I've been feeling a lot of the the stuff within myself that were suppressed, and that I was trying to deal with them by manipulating and controlling others. But yet I knew of the spiritual path, and I've been purifying my heart. And recently I've stopped trying to escape, and I've allowed myself to feel it, and I felt myself being liberated. And it's beautiful. And I agree with you on the point of judgment. I should follow the path of Christ and forgive.
Now, I didn't say should. That doesn't enter into anything that I'm thinking or speaking. It's your choice. You need to choose. And there's no should. You won't be rewarded for choosing one way or punished for choosing the other. It's your responsibility throughout your life. This is what we're in the Earth School to learn, to love. Not love that we stumble upon, not love that we find, not love that's modeled to us, not love that's demonstrated to us, but love that's chosen by us. That's where we learn. And that's what we're learning. So let's keep in touch. Can we do that?
Yeah.
You know how to
love that.
With me through the people you're connecting with, and I'd love to stay in touch with you and know what's happening to you. And maybe it's something
I would love that.
I also, and then maybe in the future we can have our conversation and share it like this with.
Yes, I would love that, and it's been such a pleasure, Gary. The light, I can feel so much lighter now that we had this conversation.
Yes, act on that. Act on that light.
All right.
That's light.
Thank you so much.
In the word, that's two meanings of light in English, isn't it? You feel lighter, like you want to float, and there's light. There's illumination where before there was darkness. So I suggest to everyone listening, if you read English and you can get a hold of it, read The Seat of the Soul by me. And if you can, order it as an MP3. You can listen to it. I narrated it. I don't know if it's in Arabic, but your heart will tell you all of the things that are in it, and I'll support you. And Faoud will support you in experimenting with him.
Gary, it's been a pleasure. I'm gonna put all the relevant links below so people can have direct access, and we will stay in touch for sure.
Let's do that. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, Gary, much love and all the best. Bye-bye.